Well, here we are, hot on the heels of the last video. It's me back in the garden, but I really couldn't wait. I needed to address something. The eagle-eyed amongst you might have spotted a mission of sorts. I said the rhinoceros in art and literature. Of course, there was no discussion of literature in the last video. So there we are. That's what I'm going to be talking about this time. And actually, the eagle-eyed amongst you is a bit of a mangled metaphor, sort of like that classic line from a movie from way back when, Ghostbusters. Can't remember whether it's Bill Murray or Dan Aykroyd's character who says, "Stop, listen, can you smell something?" But anyway, the eagle-eyed amongst you might have spotted, well, of course, that's entirely not true. Might have heard. What would be a suitable animal metaphor for hearing? Well, there's a potential rabbit hole to dive down. I confess I've been there and done that. It turns out that the creature with the best, according to a reasonable measure, hearing in the animal kingdom is a wax moth. I believe that's its name. Wax moth. Well, it's a funny little moth that is preyed upon by bats, and of course bats are famous for their location, and in order to evade it, these wax moths have found a clever way of hearing and dodging the sounds. But I don't think as a metaphor it's really going to catch on. Eagle-eyed works very well. Wax moth-eared. No, somehow I don't think that's going to grab the public's attention. Anyway, I'm digressing, as I tend to. Let's get back to my point. The rhinoceros in literature. And the question was put to me, well, is there any rhinoceroses in literature? And I checked that. It is rhinoceroses, rather like octopuses. Do they occur in literature? One wouldn't think so. But as it happens, they do. I have a file that I opened, and actually I opened this some time ago on my computer hard drive for book references, specifically about the rhinoceros. And I did this because I've been plotting this exhibition, if I'm truly honest, for well over 10 years. I have an old sketchbook with my first reference to it, which must have been about 2012, after seeing a William Kentridge exhibition, which was chock full of rhinoceroses in all sorts of intriguing poses. Anyway, I opened the file, did some research. Now, two of the books, I'll unbench them now, just to let you know that they do exist, and I'll focus on the third, really, which is much more, not more appropriate, actually. I think they all will eventually find their way into my exhibition. But the first book was The Golden Rhinoceros, which is a collection of academic essays about Middle-age African history, of all things. And as it happens, there is a very famous sculptural artifact from, I think, the 1300s, maybe the 13th century even, a golden rhinoceros found in what I suppose is now northeastern, a grave in northeastern South Africa. And that's one of the essays. It is titled The Golden Rhinoceros, and there's lots of others. So that's something to tuck into. There's also a book, and I'm not going to mention the title because it's the punchline to something, as you will hear. But it's a book written about how Zen koans can save your life. perhaps I'll read it because that in itself is quite intriguing. What is the Zen koan about rhinoceroses? Well, the master says to his assistant, bring me the elephant fan, whatever that might be, in parentheses, it's not part of the koan. Bring me the elephant fan, and the assistant replies, it is broken. And quick as a flash, the master says, well then bring me the rhinoceros. Now what that means, I have no idea. I'm going to have to actually read the koan and sort of delve in. It's something to do with the incredible and the absurd, but it probably needs a little bit more unpacking, and even then will only make a sort of hazy sort of sense. That's the way of Zen koans. But never mind. This brings me on to the third book that I have. Well, actually, it's a collection of plays, one of which is simply entitled Rhinoceros. And the plays were all written by the famous absurdist French-Romanian playwright Eugene Ionescu. And I'd like to say I'm very fond of Ionescu's plays, but I've only seen one of them. I've never actually read Rhinoceros. I've done the sort of summary cliff note sort of thing in time for this video. Actually, I did it some time ago. And the play that I saw was when I was at school, and a group of us from our English class went to the Grahamstown English Festival, where a Johannesburg private school, girls' private school, put on the remarkable work by Ionescu, The Bald Prima Donna. Now, I have no idea what happened in The Bald Prima Donna, other than I think there was a fireman somewhere in it, and there was one scene that I will never forget, which involved these two young ladies, and they would have these absurd conversations. I think one was the fireman, who knows, and the other kept on popping up. And in these conversations, there was a moustache that kept on getting swapped very cleverly from one actress to the other. I can't remember how they did it or any more details than that. But I can't forget The Bald Prima Donna and the sort of transferred moustache. Wonderful. And it was a great trip, the Grahamstown English Festival, back in July 1984. Boy, 40 years ago. Who'd have ever guessed? Anyway, I'm digressing again. What is Ionescu's play Rhinoceros all about? Well, it takes place in a small French village, and there's a character whose name, I'm going to say, if memory serves me correctly, which is a fair enough phrase, because I read this maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, so it would have been easy to forget that his name was Berenger, but I think I haven't. I think that was his name. Berenger's a sort of village character, a bit of a cheerful drunk, or maybe a cynical drunk. I'm not sure. And he's talking to a friend and at a cafe, as one does in France. And ever so often, rhinoceros appear, now I was going to say a troop of rhinoceros, but I did some research on that as well, because they are fascinating creatures. I think it's a troop of elephants. It's in fact, what a wonderful name. If you're not familiar with the collective noun for a rhinoceros, a bunch of rhinoceroses, it's a crash of rhinoceroses. How amazing is that? I hope it's true. I haven't just made that up, but I think I read it, and I think it was a reliable source. At any rate, a crash of rhinoceros charge through this French village and become subject to the conversation. The play goes on, all sorts of things happen. Berenger's friend eventually turns into a rhinoceros. It's all very hilarious in sort of French absurdist play kind of ways, and equally very serious, symbolic. And what do the rhinoceros symbolise? What is the play all about? And I think if the Sparky Cliff Note type website is to be believed, it's about conformity, and in particular, in the case of Ionescu, the fact that he was Romanian but lived in France eventually, it was all about fascism. And I suppose the rhinoceroses symbolise people taking the very reasonable views which slowly morph into the evil thinking of world-dominating rhinoceroses. I don't think rhinoceroses are really a good stand-in for sort of Machiavellian world evil leader types. I think in general, when they do appear in cartoons and things like that, Disney and what have you, I think they tend to be goons rather than leaders, tying into some obvious rhinoceros stereotypes that they're not very bright. I don't think they probably are very bright. They are, after all, in that one measure of potential intelligence, sort of the ratio of body weight to brain size, a 2.5-ton animal with an 800-gram brain compared to, say, a 70-kilogram person with a 2.5 kilogram, 1.5 kilogram. How heavy are brains? Is it 2.5 pounds? Maybe it's 1.5 kilograms. At any rate, it's heavier than a rhinoceros's. So I don't think they're the brightest creatures. They're apparently not blind. They do have wonderful hearing. They can be quite bad-tempered, although more so than other animals, I don't know. The consequences of an annoyed rhinoceros are probably more cataclysmic than an annoyed meerkat, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily more bad-tempered. At any rate, I felt that I couldn't leave you hanging for a whole week, and I at least needed to make it clear that the rhinoceros does pop up in books from time to time. And the more I've been researching, I've come across more rhinoceros sculptures, one by the British wildlife sculptress Kendra Haast. She works with chicken wire, which she uses the mesh and kind of layers it to make life-size wildlife sculptures. Very, very realistic, sort of based on detailed drawings that she does on game drives and things like that. Fascinating person, also connected with one of those ancient European menageries. Apparently there was one in the 1700s at the Tower of London, and in honour of this she did a series of sculptures of the sorts of animals, which might have included giraffes and lions, and I don't know what else, I can't remember. At any rate, she did these life-size sculptures of animals installed wonderfully at the Tower of London, probably more than a decade ago, but something that I would love to see. So the exploration continues, and the rhinoceros does seem like the more I dig, the more it will be a animal that yields fantastically serendipitous connections, allusions, imagery, metaphors, stories to be told. Don't know where it will lead. For the time being, I just need to work on doing my first study of a rhinoceros head. And that's quite difficult to do because there's not an enormous amount of anatomical drawing texts on the rhinoceros. Dime a dozen for people, but unsurprisingly, when people draw a rhinoceros, they tend to just go to the zoo and We don't have one of those in Paripuera, hence the need to make life-size sculptures and put them in my garden. So that's it for this week. Again, 2 for the price of 1. Lucky you, or not. It is a sunny day, so as always, I trust your lives are filled with joy, and from a sunny Brazil, ciao.